Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville, your host. Tonight is October 17th, 2016, and we've got a lot of information to try and cover tonight. We are back for the first time in a number of weeks. I've been in the Middle East for the last 2 weeks or so, so the shows that you've seen or heard aired are, of course, recorded some time ago, or have been recorded some time ago, and I do believe last week may have been a rebroadcast. So if those of you who are regular listeners were wondering why so many rebroadcasts over the last week, this is why. And we're going to talk about the results of that trip here on the show tonight. We're also going to discuss the hurricane here in South Carolina and the disaster response, because there's a few things I need to say about that as well. And, of course, we're going to continue talking about the situation in the Middle East right now, particularly in Syria, as the world gears up for World War III, and there is no hope in sight for the U.S. policy in 2017, given the options that we have as presidential candidates. One of them is a complete psychotic warmonger who has essentially stated at one point that they want a confrontation with Iran and Russia, and the other is Donald Trump. So we can't have this as our options, but this is what we're facing, and we'll deal with that in a minute as well. Now, for those of you who are just joining the show for the first time tonight, I encourage you to catch Truth on the Tracks here every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here at ucy.tv. The show airs every week and is rebroadcast throughout the week. You can access the show's personal website at ucy.tv/TT for Truth on the Tracks. And if you're interested in my work, then please, I would encourage you to go to brandonturbeville.com. I write regularly for activistpost.com, naturalblaze.com, eraofwisdom.org. You can find my work on all of those sites. And of course, if you're interested in my work specifically, then please, brandonturbeville.com is the place that you want to go on a regular basis, because that is where I repost all of my articles, all of the YouTube videos, all of the archive versions of this show, and all of the book information is there as well. You can buy all the books from brandonturbeville.com, contact information, all the relevant information is there, so we won't continue to go over that. We've instituted this new policy of action alerts and strategy points, which you should be following on a regular basis. Now, speaking of the action alerts, we're going to have some more of those out and some strategy point documents out soon. And again, the action alerts are acute. They are emergency action needed, and this will explain the problem and the steps that you need to take in order to fix the problem, in order to get active and change the status quo. The strategy points are something that are more long-term. This is something we'll be seeing weeks, months, even years down the road. This is our plan of attack, more big picture, but not as in totality as the overall discussion. But this will be more long-term, big picture than the action alerts, which are short-term. Now, in terms of the action alerts, we've been putting out recently calls for readers, listeners, to get involved on the issue of Kratom. Kratom, as regular listeners will know, was under attack by the DEA, which should not exist, but under attack by the DEA, attempting to ban it, emergency schedule it as Schedule 1 on the level with heroin. We have put out a number of action alerts. We've talked about it on the show. We've coordinated and worked with other people. Cassius Camarampi of Era of Wisdom has been instrumental in leading this fight as well. And there's been a victory, a minor victory. Now, before people get too excited, I want to preface this with the fact that this fight is not over. But I want people to understand that we have indeed had a victory. The DEA has backed off on its intention to schedule Kratom as Schedule 1 on the immediate scheduling plan. The DEA has backed off on that and dropped its intention to do so. That's the victory, okay, that you can now go online, you can buy Kratom from the head shop, you can buy Kratom anywhere that's not illegal at the state level, so there's a couple of states that you can't buy it, but we're back to where we were 6 months ago in terms of the legal status of Kratom. Here's the danger. Here's where the fight is not over. The DEA still has its sights set on Kratom. We've been given a 3-month period for public comment. The DEA is going to allow the FDA to investigate, make its own determinations, and the public will have a chance for public comment. The date, I believe, is December 31st or somewhere in December. I'll have to give you the details again. I've been out of the country for the last 2 weeks, so some of the details are going to be a little foggy, but we'll definitely catch up with the details next week. But December is the date. Sometime in December, the DEA will make its ruling based on the information provided to it by the FDA and by the public comment period. Now, the danger of this is it looks like what the DEA wants to do is blame the FDA and claim that it gave ample time for research and discussion before it just bans it anyway. This we cannot allow. We cannot allow the FDA to give information to the DEA suggesting that Kratom is harmful or that it's a public health problem or that it has no health benefits. We cannot allow that. And we are not searching for a solution that has Kratom available only by the permission of a doctor. Enough with this permission of a doctor. In a free country, you don't need permission from a doctor to take a substance. We're not looking for supplanting one tyranny with another. So we're not looking for that. We're looking for total decriminalization. You buy Kratom online, you buy Kratom in the store, buy Kratom wherever the hell you want to buy Kratom, and if someone thinks it's toxic, then they don't have to take it. That's what we're arguing for. So we can't allow the FDA to give this negative type of information to the DEA and then provide justification for the scheduling of the substance as Schedule 1. Cannot be allowed. We also need to hit the DEA and the FDA hard with the public comments. The big danger is that this is being done in December. We've got Halloween, we've got Thanksgiving, we've got Christmas especially, and then we've got New Year's. And this is where big decisions tend to get made because everybody in the country is focused on the true meaning of Christmas, which is running around in shopping malls and buying expensive crap made in China that's actually made to break. In 3 months you can buy more cheap quality crap, but at inflated prices and do it all over again. So the true meaning of Christmas, of course, is being packed into malls and Walmart and strip malls, fighting one another and begrudgingly buying each other gifts that no one will appreciate because they're also pissed off because they were out spending what little money they had on gifts as well. This is why it's so dangerous that it's happening in December, because everybody's distracted. New Year's, same thing. It's after the Christmas holiday, right before the drunken celebration of New Year's, and no one's truly paying attention, so they can schedule Kratom, and then everyone wakes up mid-January and realizes that they lost their ability to purchase Kratom. We cannot allow this. We cannot allow the holidays to keep us off guard here. We have to hit this just as hard as we did with the emergency scheduling. And unfortunately, I'm already seeing a weakening of the resolve because so many outlets are posting articles that say, we've got victory, Kratom is still legal, and it's throwing people off the path. So if you're part of a media organization or you're watching a media organization put out articles that say, we won, Kratom is legal, we kept Kratom safe, what a victory, please, If you're the outlet, stop doing that. You're throwing people off of the path to action. You haven't won the war, you won a battle. And if you're looking at an organization that's putting out that type of information, please contact them and tell them to stop. Tell them that the war on Kratom is not over, that we simply won one battle. So we can't allow this to continue. We need to get active in that area. So now on to the question of the Middle East. All right, so I was in the Middle East for about 2 weeks, give or take a day or two, in Lebanon. It was our intention to make it to Syria, but there was an issue with the visas. So instead, we ended up in Lebanon for about 2 weeks, and we managed to make the best of this trip. Of course, Lebanon is an amazing place. We were able to talk to Syrians who had crossed the border into Lebanon for personal reasons, business reasons, family reasons, whatever, and Syrian refugees who were in Lebanon as a result of the conflict. We were able to talk to see most of the country, or a good portion of the country, the north, the south, east, west. Lebanon's small enough that you can do that within a sphere of a couple of days. You can see the country, and it was the ability to get to understand the culture, to understand the environmental effects that coalesce to form the potential for any types of conflict, the ability to understand Middle Eastern politics and Lebanese politics, the tangled web of Lebanese politics, and we were able to soak up this information and to take a look at the terrain as well, and basically the idea was to go and attempt to immerse yourself into the culture and into what was going on in the region. And of course, Lebanon borders Syria, so this is not so far away from the conflict. Now, a couple of points I want to make about the trip, about the stay that we had there. I think to the vast majority of Americans, we have the Syrian crisis being part of just a blip on a cluttered radar screen, right? Here in America, we have to worry about daily survival, taxes, wages, free trade, etc., for the more sophisticated of those who are watching, and working 12, 14-hour days even just to get by, a couple of different jobs. So the details of something like Syria or the Middle East is something that tends to fall by the wayside. And the people who are able to devote enough time to looking at the Syrian crisis are confronted with this unprecedented onslaught of propaganda, which is demonizing the Syrian government, demonizing the Syrian president, is killing his own people, he's a brutal dictator, he's genocidal, all that according to the mainstream media. And of course, the Syrian people are victims of this propaganda onslaught here as well. The Syrian people are portrayed as being obsessed with religion, as being inherently divided, as being opposed to their government, caught in between the crossfire between a brutal dictator and democracy protesters who have guns, and of course the small element of terrorists, the moderate rebels and the extremist rebels. So this is what they're presented to be by the U.S. media. And of course the Syrian people, just like most everybody else across the world, except when the media tells them specifically who to care about, the Syrians are not portrayed as human. They're just numbers, right? 100 died today, 86 died the day before. They don't portray them as being mothers or sons or fathers or children or grandparents. They're just blips on the cluttered radar screen. They're just data in a spreadsheet. So this is how they're presented to the American people, and I should say an increasingly hardened American public, hard-hearted American public, is becoming more and more desensitized to death and destruction and degradation at home and abroad. Now, having been to the Middle East, having been to Lebanon, I can safely tell you that the claims that are being made by the Western media, and in terms of the Syrian people and in terms of the wider Middle East, are not true. That they are the opposite of the truth. Again, we had many opportunities to talk with ordinary citizens from Syria and Lebanon, of course. But since we're focusing on Syria, I'm trying to point that out. We met with Syrian citizens who were visiting Lebanon or fleeing the war and were refugees in Lebanon. And refugees were plentiful in Beirut. And those refugees who were able to speak English, or we had the ability for a translator there, they would sit for a while and speak about the absolute horrors that were visited upon them and their families and their towns by the proxy wars of the United States. Now, what I want to point out, what's so important about talking to a Syrian outside of Syria? Right? This is, I think a lot of people may have a knee-jerk reaction. It's like, you talk to Syrians, but you weren't in Syria talking to them. Yeah, well, that's actually very important, right? There's a unique benefit to talking to somebody who's not living in their home country, because you know with relative certainty that the person you're speaking to doesn't have anything to lose or to gain by giving a false perception of the government or of the terrorist. One of the frequent accusations that you get from the Western media is that if you ever speak to a Syrian actually living in Syria, is that they're handicapped by their fear of retribution from the Syrian government. So if they say, we like Assad, we support Assad, the Western media will say, well, of course they say that because they're scared of Assad, and if they come out publicly and say they don't support him, he'll come out and arrest them and torture them and barrel bomb them or whatever. So according to this train of thought, if a guy criticizes Assad in Syria, he's subject to arrest. But in Lebanon, that's not the case. All right, you could be as vocal of an anti-Assad Syrian as you can be. You can speak your mind, and you're out of Assad's reach. You're even out of earshot by the Syrian government. A Syrian in Lebanon can speak his piece, and they can do safely in the knowledge that the alleged brutal dictator can't reach him. They could spit on Assad's portrait if they wanted to, and there's nothing the Syrian government can do to them. That being said, out of all the Syrians I personally met and personally spoke to, whether they were visitors, refugees, whether they were Muslim or Christian, male or female, not one of them supported the rebels, and all of them, 100% of them, fully supported the Syrian government, and 100% of them fully supported Bashar al-Assad. These individuals had nothing but hate for the terrorists and nothing but love for Assad and the Syrian government. 100% of them. And that is not an exaggeration. Again, what I was trying to say earlier is that if you were in Beirut, one of the striking things about Beirut, and again, the Lebanese people are incredibly hospitable and friendly to visitors, even Western visitors. The Syrians, however, I guess there's something special about the Syrians. They were not only incredibly friendly and hospitable, but also kind and forgiving. The fact that, you see, this might confuse many Americans, but Syrians are well aware of who is behind the proxy war, while Americans and British and French sit around and say, oh, well, the Syrian crisis is so convoluted, nobody really knows what's happening. The truth of the matter is the British, the French, the American people don't know what's happening, but other people do. And it's wrong to project your own ignorance onto other people. There's a level of education and sophistication, intellectual sophistication that exists in Syria that does not exist in the United States. Stupidity is not valued in Syria in the way that it is in the West, particularly in the U.S. Sound bites are not valued in the same way that that it is here in America. Again, there are a number of different outlets in Syria that will give very different opinions of a similar issue. With the United States, there may be a different spin. You might get a conservative spin, a liberal spin, a Pentagon spin, but the narrative always remains the same. So, for instance, Fox might say the ISIS threat is posing an existential threat to the United States, and therefore we should bomb ISIS in Syria. The left might say, well, ISIS really isn't that big of a deal, but the Syrian government is brutal and they're killing their own people, therefore we should bomb in Syria. And so you get the idea that while one outlet's giving a conservative view and the other's giving a leftist view, the two parts of the narrative that are most important are the same. The idea that Assad is a dictator and the idea that the U.S. should bomb. So this is what I'm trying to get across. In Syria, it's actually slightly more open in terms of the perspectives that you get, and therefore you have a more sophisticated populace. In Syria, there would be, and in Lebanon as well, there are, well, actually, let me take a step back and just, I don't want to go too far into explaining the cultural similarities and differences, or we'll be here all day. What I want to get across to people is that while Americans are befuddled, Syrians know what's going on, right? Syrians can tell you who is funding each and every one of these different terrorist groups and who these terrorist groups are a part of, and that they're exactly the same. They know that Israel is supporting them. They know that Saudi Arabia is supporting them. They know that Turkey's helping facilitate them, and the U.S. is training them and arming them and directing them. Americans don't know any of those things. So it's wrong to project ignorance onto the Syrians. They're full aware of this. With them being full aware of this, you would think that an American coming over to the Middle East to speak with someone who was a refugee, who'd watched their family being killed in front of them, or watched their home being destroyed, regardless, even if their story is not so tragic, they had to flee their home, their only life they ever knew, to come to a different place and start over. Or instead of being a small business owner, now they're a janitor in either a hotel or a store. They're pulling weeds on the street as opposed to sitting in an office. Everything's been turned upside down for them. So with the full knowledge that the United States is behind these terrorists, they still welcomed Americans with a level of forgiveness and openness that is unbelievable. It's not describable by the words that I have. I can't put that into description. How they would be willing to stop what they were doing and tell Americans, those of us in our group, that they were indebted to us for what we were doing for their country. This is stunning, right? They don't owe us a thing. If anything, we owe them. But they would see an individual in the group who may have a Syrian flag wristband or something, and then they would run over to the person and point at the wristband and say, Syria, Syria, and throw up their thumb and say, Bashar al-Assad, right? And then they would sit for half an hour attempting to have a conversation until we got a translator or Google Translate and were able to have a conversation about their home country. And thankfully we had access to a translator most of the time who was able to translate the conversation. And this is 100% of the people that we met from Syria were in favor of their government. And they've lost everything. You can't talk to a single Syrian who hasn't lost family or very close friends at the hands of America's rebels. It's not possible to even speak with a single Syrian who's outside of Syria who hasn't lost someone close to them. The magnitude of this crisis is unimaginable in scale, but yet that's not. They didn't treat Americans as if we were the enemy. they're able to separate the American people from the American government. And this is something, again, that's missing in the United States. In the United States, we look at other people, and I'd say the vast majority of Americans look at other people as if they are their government and they are this one blob of people. The Iranians are all evil. The Iranian government is evil, and then the Iranian people are all evil, conspiring in this massive conspiracy to overthrow the United States and to come in and convert everyone to Islam by force. This is the views that are presented by the American people, to the American people, and this is what is eaten up. The Russians, the same thing. Putin is the biggest enemy of our time, and all the Russians are horrible people. And this is, it's infantile, but it's extremely dangerous when someone like that, with an infantile understanding of the world, has a weapon that can destroy the world. That's what's so concerning. And so this is what we have here. They welcomed Americans, and this is extremely important. I don't. You would not get the welcome. I didn't get the welcome as an American coming into America as I got into coming to the Middle East as an American. I should say it's an experience. Everybody in the United States should travel outside of the country, and I don't mean to Canada or to Mexico. They should go to Europe at least. They should go as far as possible, see how other people live, and you might figure out very quickly that they're actually humans, and they do indeed value life in the same way as much as we do, and that there are vast cultural differences, but there are also vast similarities, or many similarities. We're all people and all have the same hopes and desires, although we express them in different ways. And then you should have the experience of coming back into America and being welcomed by overweight, low IQ TSA agents screaming orders at you as if you're entering Auschwitz and not the United States. The freest country in the world will be shattered. Those ideas will be shattered when you come back into the freest country in the world and get barked at as if you're a dog. And this is why tourism in America is down, because nobody outside of the rest of the world wants to come here and be treated like they're a Jew in Nazi Germany. And this is the experience. I won't go into that. Maybe at some point in the future we'll talk about coming back to the freest country in the world being treated like shit. But I just wanted to stress that point about how welcoming they were. I don't know. I'm almost positive that Americans would not welcome someone if the Chinese were funding proxy wars, moderate rebels in the United States and other terrorists in the United States, and Chinese people came to the United States to say, we express opposition to what our government is doing to you and solidarity with you. I don't think that America in mass would accept them in the same way. They don't accept people in the same way in peacetime. So I imagine war would be even worse. But the Syrians are much more forgiving than that, despite the fact that what we've done. Now, the other issue that I wanted to point out here, the idea that you talk to Americans and you constantly hear this line, whether it's coming from leftists or conservatives or whatever. Well, they've been fighting for thousands of years. And generally, that's followed up by a position that's not entirely unreasonable, which is to leave them alone. But they've been fighting for thousands of years. But the problem is they haven't. They always want to go back to biblical times, to the Old Testament, to say that they were warring against one another, and to go into then conflicts such as Iraq and Iran in the 80s, or conflicts centering around Israel. If you look at the history, though, what continent on the face of the earth has been at war more than Europe. Last time I checked, Europe started 2 world wars and only stopped warring amongst themselves in the 90s. And we're going to say this to the Middle East has constantly been fighting. Sure, there's been wars. There's been wars on every continent. The idea is to suggest that this is a religious war, that the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims have all been fighting one another for thousands of years and can't get along. They can't live in civilized society because of their religion and because of the region is destabilized. But again, that's not the case. It's been quite stable. The major destabilizing force is, of course, Israel, and if you remove that from the equation, the Middle East becomes incredibly stable. In fact, it becomes one of the more stable regions in the world. But you have to remove the destabilizing force. Outside of that, even with the destabilizing force, if you remove the presence of the United States and NATO, again, it becomes a very stable place. If you're referring to the wars that are taking place in Iraq and Syria and Libya, that's our fault, not theirs. So this idea that they've been fighting for thousands of years, this is propaganda that's coming out of the news, that's coming out of Hollywood, and unfortunately coming out of the churches as well. So the Syrians are fully aware of who is behind this war, even if Americans aren't, despite the fact that their country is starting the war and has been facilitating the war, created the war from the very beginning. Now, I don't know what else I can say about that, but the idea is that they've been fighting for thousands of years. This stuff is nonsensical, and you get that the belief that there is a religious aspect, that everybody is radicalized, and I can tell you that's not the case. There is not this concern, particularly in Syria, about religion. Of course, religion, I would say religion is more akin to something like race here in the United States. In Syria, people are Syrians. They're not Sunnis, Shiites, Christians. They're Syrians. And then after that comes the religion, I'm a Syrian, then I'm Muslim, then I'm Shiite, etc. And this is something that Syrians don't interact with one another typically in terms of religion. They interact with one another as if they're Syrians. Now, we had that here in the U.S. Despite all of our racial baggage, people were Americans first before they were white or black. And of course, we've seen a lot of tension stirred up recently over the last 2 years especially, that's attempting to change that and radicalize individuals into racial identities. But again, this is not the case in Syria. They are Syrians first, and religion plays less of a role than Americans think it does. If you go to Beirut, if you go to other areas as well, and this is Lebanon, but if you go to Beirut, and if you go to Damascus, go to Latakia, the people in the cities are it's very European, right? The hijab is not so common. You'll see it, of course, but even the hijab is not so common. And a lot of the women who wear the hijab are just doing it for traditional purposes, not because they're fanatics, but because it's traditional and they prefer it. I'll tell you, I saw way more women in the stupid veil that look like Charlie Brown ghost characters in Charlie Brown's Halloween. I didn't see a single one in Lebanon. Not a single veil. I saw many veils in London, mainly London. London had the most veils I've ever seen. And that should tell you something right there. Who are the West bringing in? Not a veil in the Middle East, but veils in Europe. We'll get on to that weaponized immigration soon enough. In fact, this is something else that the Syrians understand, by the way. The idea of Syrian refugees, contrary to the belief of the West that we're number one in everything and that everybody else's standards in the world is measured by ours, Syrians don't want to come here. They don't want to be in the United States. They don't want to be in Britain or France. They want to be in Syria. And they will tell you this openly. They're only there because the U.S., Britain, and France funded monkeys to go in and destroy their country and their towns and kill their family members. So, of course, many of them left. They understand also, and I was being told this by Syrian sources to begin with, and you can see this when you get on the ground, is that the individuals who are being given preference to leave Syria and come to Europe, and thus the United States, are individuals who are fundamentalists. They're giving preference to fundamentalists to come out. Turkey, trying to join the European Union, of course, once that happens, all these alleged Syrian refugees, alleged, I say, because if you could see the miles and miles of humanity flooding into Europe during this last massive wave of Syrian refugees, most of them were black as coal. That's not Syrian. They were coming from Eritrea, they were coming from the Congo, they were coming from other places in sub-Saharan Africa. But yet they were being called Syrian refugees. Why? And you could see the utter chaos that it sowed in Western Europe. I guess that these last few statements will get the show banned in places with freedom of speech, like France and Germany, where you can be jailed for asking questions about certain events, and of course it's coming in London, the United States too. But this is the point. Syrians understand the fact that most of the people coming into the West aren't even Syrian, and that fundamentalists are being given priority to go to the West. Why? If you took Syrians, the average Syrian out of Damascus or Latakia, and sent them to Europe, they'd assimilate fine. They wouldn't want to be there, but they would assimilate fine. Because there's lots of similarities between the culture. Differences, but lots of similarities. They can assimilate. Bringing people who are obsessed with religion, fundamentalist religion, nasty versions of religion, into a culture that is uber liberal and open in many different ways, is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for confrontation, especially when those individuals are told that they do not have to assimilate to other French culture, what's left of French culture. I couldn't find it when I was there, but whether it's London, whether it's the United States, you're bringing in people with a vastly different worldview than the people who live in those countries, and you're providing the proper ingredients for confrontation. That's what it's about. That's the goal, is cultural disintegration. Break up cultural cohesion. If you don't have cultural cohesion, you cannot stand up as a unified force and resist things coming down the pike. Instead, you fight one another, and you wake up one day with a tyranny, and your enemies are not only in London or Washington or Paris, your enemies are actually next door. So this is where it's going, and of course the Syrians know this. The Americans don't know this. The British and the French and Germany would sooner commit suicide than admit that people coming from other countries aren't entitled to Germany and France because of all this white guilt and European guilt. White liberalism has essentially destroyed Western Europe because of this. And the Syrians are well aware of it. You can talk openly about this with them because they are fully aware of who's getting priority to come out of their country. And of course the answer on our side of the water is not to let more and more refugees into the country. It's to stop bombing Syria and let them stay home. This is not really rocket science here. They want to be home. Let them stay home. So it's still an amazing thing to me that Syrians can welcome foreigners who are visiting the country with all the patience and the forgiveness that they have. That they're struggling to survive in a foreign country, and they're willing to sit with somebody of the very country that destroyed theirs and killed their family members, and smoke some hookah with them and discuss their homeland. It's an unbelievable act of understanding and forgiveness for them not to judge us as Americans as the enemy and to separate the people from the government. I know I was personally struck by the genuine kindness that was shown to me by people who've been given every legitimate reason to show me otherwise. We will end this discussion about our experience in the Middle East with a quote from Mark Twain. He says, "Damascus has seen all that has ever occurred on earth, and still she lives. She's looked upon the dry bones of 1,000 empires, and will see the tombs of 1,000 more before she dies." Well, judging by the people that I met on this trip, I would have to agree with Mark Twain. Now, we also need to discuss a number of other issues. I still have some time left, so let me address something else. I want to address the food in Lebanon outside of the United States. Again, the Americans have this idea. We have all these laws regarding our food safety. We've got all these organizations involved in food safety, and yet we have the most toxic, awful food supply the world over, rivaled only by China. I think China may have worse, but the food supply here in America, it's not just a question of taste. Being in Lebanon, where most of the food is non-GMO, most of the food is organic, you notice a difference, not only in the taste, but in the effects that it has on your body. Right? You can eat the food, and if you have intestinal discomfort after a few days, that tends to go away. You can eat smaller portions and be full. For instance, here in the United States, a lot of people can eat a foot-long sub from Subway. An hour later, they're hungry, despite the fact that they just had a giant sandwich. They're hungry. They gain lots of weight, but still, they're hungry all the time. In Lebanon, that's not the way. You can eat a small sandwich, and you'll be full for hours. Your blood sugar regulates. You can gorge yourself on food and lose weight if you're an American. And you'll lose weight after being there for a week and a half or so. This is an example of the benefits of clean food, and of course the panic over food poisoning. No food poisoning in Lebanon. Nobody got food poisoning there at all. I know for me personally, after being in Lebanon for 2 weeks and coming back to the United States, I got sick on the first day. Being here, not there, I felt energized and full and content when I was in Lebanon in terms of the food. But the first day that you come back to the United States and you eat the toxic crap that is essentially material designed to look and taste like food, you have a period of time where you're trying to adjust to the American diet. Is this the America that you're told exists? Is this the America that I'm 33 years old? When I grew up, I looked at America as the example for everything across the planet. Right? When people leave America and they go to other countries, they get sick because of bad food standards or bad food. Well, that's not the case. When you come back to America, you get sick because of the poor status of the food supply. It's disgusting. Food doesn't have taste. And You acclimate to it. This is the problem. We acclimate to it. I'm telling people right now who's listening to the show that the food in America doesn't have taste, and they're thinking, oh, bullshit, the food tastes great over here. It's very flavorful. It's because you're acclimated to it. Go somewhere else and eat real food and come back, and you'll see what I'm talking about, how a lot of the sandwiches that had flavor now taste like cardboard. It's really distinct. Again, another reason why people should travel. And so I just wanted to make that comment before we moved on. Now, I also want to make a comment, and I really want to get into some details because we're edging closer to World War III, and we'd like to talk about the banter back and forth, the witty banter back and forth between Samantha Power and Maria Zakharova from Russia. Well, of course, I wouldn't call it witty banter because that would include witticisms from both sides. Samantha Power doesn't really have much wit. She just whines and screams and howls like the ghoul that she is, haunting the halls of the State Department. Somebody made a great meme by just posting up the picture of Samantha Power looking like death next to Maria Zakharova. No wonder that this is an example now of what America represents. Put the two next to each other. And look, you have Samantha Power on one hand, who looks like she is dying from lack of vitamin D. She is promoting war, death, destruction. It shows on her face. She copies Obama in her speeches. She has no real wit whatsoever. She doesn't seem to understand the situation. All she knows to do is look ghoulish and promote war. On the other hand, you have Maria Zakharova, who's a very attractive, intelligent woman who understands the situation, doesn't have to wait for word coming down from Putin because she understands what's actually going on and thus can respond to the ghoul in real time. This is what we value now in America. Samantha Power. We'll get into Samantha later on, the White House ghoul. But I want to talk about the hurricane here in South Carolina. This poses a number of different points that I want to make. First of all, in 1989, South Carolina was hit dead on by a Category 4 hurricane. It's called Hurricane Hugo. I was here. I remember it. It destroyed the area. Destroyed the PD area. People were without power for a week, maybe a little longer. Military was on the streets. It was utter destruction. In 2016, South Carolina gets hit head-on with a Category 1. People are without power for a week, and it's utter destruction. We just lost a town in the PD. It's underwater completely. Nichols, South Carolina. It's underwater. Most of the people in Nichols have lost everything. They've lost their homes. They've lost their vehicles, the materials. They're on the streets and they're homeless now. They're in the shelters. But the town of Lumberton, North Carolina, underwater. Now there are evacuations for Britain's Neck, South Carolina, Centenary, South Carolina, underwater. Dams broke in Lumberton, and this is what caused the flooding because it came down the river, swole the river up on Nichols and the other areas, and now there's more levees that are set to break. A Category 1, ladies and gentlemen, a Category 1. This shows you the level of our infrastructure. Are we third world? No, but we're not first world anymore. 20 years ago, nearly 30 years ago, a Category 4 did a lot of damage. In 2016, a Category 1 does just as much. The Category 4 didn't do to Nichols, South Carolina, what the Category 1 did. This is an example of how far we've fallen in the United States in terms of our infrastructure. Now, the individuals in Nichols, and you can look up the story, you can go look up the photographs, and you can go listen to NPR, believe it or not, has covered the issue. And look and see what the town looked like and what it looks like now. many of the individuals from Nichols have been moved to shelters outside of Nichols, into shelters in Mullins, South Carolina. That's the next town over, basically. Another very small town, economically depressed, and destroyed by free trade. So free trade did what hurricanes couldn't do to Mullins. And now we have all these hundreds of people in shelters who have nothing. No clothes, no food, nothing at all. And, of course, the Red Cross, the American Red Cross, is operating the shelters. Well, individuals throughout the community in Mullins, and I would imagine Marion, probably even some in Florence as well, have gone out to go to the shelters and bring buckets of chicken bog and grilled chicken and all this good country cooking food to people who haven't had anything. But the Red Cross is feeding them cans of beanie weenie and a grilled cheese sandwich every single day for these people who are stuck in a shelter, which, by the way, they don't have rooms. This is an open-air shelter. This is a la Katrina, right? Remember that they're in gyms, and they're just laying on the basketball gym floor. And which, by the way, members of the community had to put the roof back on, one, so they could have the shelter. And so these guys are eating grilled cheese and beanie weenie every day. And members of the community, again, economically depressed community, they go out, they buy food from the grocery store, they cook it, and they bring it up to these people to at least give them a hot meal. And what does the Red Cross do? Sends them packing. We don't accept hot food at our shelters. Well, isn't that something? The Red Cross is now turning away people who are bringing food to hurricane disaster victims. I've got reports of people who are bringing blankets, toothbrushes, clothes for children and such, bringing it to the shelter and watching the Red Cross put it in a box and take it off to the back room somewhere and never distributing it to the people in the shelter. Now, they're not giving good excuses as to why they're doing this. This is the Red Cross, they're a big organization, and this is why I don't donate to the Red Cross, I don't support the Red Cross, I don't like the Red Cross, because, remember, in Haiti, they took all that money, built, 3 shitty houses in Haiti, and then marched upon the television screens talking about how such good work they did for the people of Haiti. This is what they expect to hear in the PD. Well, they've come to the PD, and they are not distributing the goods. They're preventing people from getting help. Probably some stupid rule about foodborne illness, I would imagine, because that's what they tend to do when they arrest you for feeding homeless people. But I don't care about rules in this situation. We are, in terms of the community has managed to get food to these people. Not because of the Red Cross, but despite the Red Cross. There are people in the community of Mullins who have organized. They've been forced to organize themselves because the individuals who were supposed to organize it didn't. Meaning the Red Cross and the emergency management agencies of the area. So they've managed to take up donations on their own, and they've managed to go out and cook food on their own. And because the Red Cross will not allow hot food on their premises for disaster victims, they've managed to go out and pick up the people in the shelter with vans. Again, community effort. People in their own private personal vehicles are driving out to the shelters to take the hurricane victims down the street 5 miles to a parking lot where the food's being cooked for them by the local people, and letting them eat, letting them sort through some of the clothes to get the clothes for their kids and so forth, and then driving them back to the shelter. What a tremendous waste of resources because of the Red Cross. These are people who are spending their gas money and their time that could have been doing other things, but they have to do that because the Red Cross is in their way, preventing them from getting food to people. They are I cannot stop harping on this. The American Red Cross is preventing hungry people from getting food. That should never be forgotten. Now, as I said, in Haiti and in other disaster areas, the Red Cross always parades after the event, self-promotion, demanding money from people, because, when disaster strikes, it's the Red Cross that rushes in while everybody else rushes out. Well, we could do bad all our own. You can rush out for all I care. You're not doing anything really of value. Of course, whenever the Red Cross found out that the local people were giving out supplies and food in the parking lot and driving hurricane victims out to go get it, the Red Cross sent a truck then to help. Of course, you got to make sure you have that Red Cross anywhere there's stuff being given out. Well, every time there's a disaster, they parade in front of the television and talk about how they did a great job of saving people. Well, you won't do it this time. I would suggest keeping quiet about your involvement in the PD, because we're not going to let you parade around like you saved humanity in the PD. We will make sure that everybody knows that you ran the community off who were trying to help their neighbors, their friends, their family with hot food, and you ran them off, and you had all kinds of food wasted because of this in the middle of a disaster. So you can shape up or ship out, but we're not going to let people remember you as the heroes that you're not. That's all I have to say about that issue. We're going to keep people up on the hurricane disaster relief, of course, as well. It's a very bad situation. If anybody wants to donate, please just contact me, anticodex@yahoo.com. They'll take money, they'll take clothes, they'll take supplies, gift cards to buy the supplies. It doesn't matter. If you anticodex@yahoo.com, if you're interested in donating to the people of the PD. The PD area of South Carolina has been devastated by the free trade policies. They've been devastated by environmental impacts. They've been devastated by poor education, poor opportunities, and they didn't need this. This is just something else this was the worst possible thing that could have happened. And so if anybody's interested in donating, it's anticodex@yahoo.com, and I'll give you the information on how to do that. Now, that was the gist of the trip to Lebanon and the rant about the hurricane disaster relief. Next week, I want to talk about the war of words between Zakharova and Samantha Power. I want to talk about the convoy in Syria that was allegedly bombed, and I want to talk about the move toward World War III. Also, we need to talk about marijuana laws and a number of other different issues as well. So we're back in the United States, going to get back to the swing of things very soon, and I hope you'll tune in next week, because we'll go over a lot of detailed information and hopefully some action alerts as well, because we've got to get active and stay active. Even though we didn't win the war against Kratom, we didn't win the war that was being waged against Kratom, we did win a battle, and every single one of you should be aware that you have power and you have the potential to make a positive change. Look what we did. We didn't win the war yet, but we won the battle. Now, it's not time to sit back on our laurels and be quiet and talk about how great of a victory this was. It's time to suit up and prepare to march forward, to go on the offensive now. That's what we need to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. We'll see you next week.